I don't want to keep a security deposit. If I go into a house when someone moves out and everything's perfect and I'm able to return the whole deposit, that's amazing. That means I don't have to do any work.
It's almost always the unlicensed landlords. It's almost always the ones who do things off the books that give the rest of us a bad reputation.
Our company manages over 1,000 doors. Neighbor calls our office and tells us that he thinks there's some illegal activity going on at this house. Dude then offered me $5,000 to just turn around and ignore it. But
You're like, to which I then accepted.
Colorado legislature has been very harsh about property management laws. You're going to slip through the cracks and could face huge fines, could end up with in lots of trouble because you didn't have someone out to fix the refrigerator within 24 hours.
Welcome back to Altitude Agents. I am Kari Wong, your 2024 YPN Chair.
And I'm Kari Wright, your 2024 YPN Co-Chair.
And this is our esteemed guest, Drew Bartlett.
Hi there, I'm Drew. I'm the Business Development Manager for Dorman Real Estate Management, does property management.
Cool.
Awesome. So just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, how you got into property management.
Yeah, so I kind of had a different path to getting here than a lot of people do. I had a full career before being a realtor in radio. I managed radio stations in Texas and Kansas and
So cool.
DJ'd and all that sort of stuff. And then in 2017, I'd gotten laid off from big radio corporation and wanted something else and moved to Colorado and decided to get into real estate.
That's a big change.
Yeah.
I was looking for something pretty drastic. And I'm not going to lie, the allure that people sell you on with being a realtor, set your own hours and, make as much money as you want and everything. I had been kind of a workaholic before. And so it was like
that sounds nice.
Very appealing. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
Awesome. So you did sales first. Tell us about that.
So I got licensed in July of 2017 and I did sales for about a year and quickly learned that set your own hours and you only have to work when you want to is not the case at all.
Choose the 80 hours that you want to work.
Exactly.
Yep, exactly. And be available all hours of the
Every
day. And so I did that for about a year and was just like regretting making that choice and kind of fell into property management. A buddy of mine who's also a realtor was working at Dorman and wanted to leave to go back to sales. Because PM is definitely not for everybody. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
It's one or the other, dog.
And he was like, you should apply here. And I've been there for about 6 years now and really, really found my spot.
Yeah. And it's cool that now you said business development manager.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm the one I still manage properties. I just have a smaller portfolio than some of our other PMs, but I spend the bulk of my time now talking to owners who are looking for management and doing the onboarding and sign up process and everything along those lines.
Nice.
So you had mentioned it before, the difference between like, hey, I'm doing sales or I'm doing property management. I think a lot of our clientele or the general public perception is like, they kind of put us into one. How would you differentiate the two?
Well, the thing is that in Colorado, you do have to be licensed to be able to negotiate contracts on housing. So property management has to be licensed here. It's not that way in every state.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I came from Kansas and anyone can be a property manager there. I like the way we do it here because there's a lot more to it than just, here's the keys to your apartment, I'm going to collect your rent.
Exactly.
And there's lots of laws in place.
In my opinion, it's more than sales.
I don't disagree with you. But it's just different. In the sales world, it was much more about, what is happening today? What is this? Whereas in the PM world, it's much more about every day is completely different, but they're all also everything in a system. And it's kind of there's systems in place this is how this works. This is how this works. And on my end, my biggest thing to it is that I work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I'm off on the weekends. I'm off on the evenings.
That's nice.
Can have a work-life balance. But during that 9 to 5, you're basically taking a beating from everybody because the only time people are talking to you is when something's going wrong.
Yeah, that's true. Because I was in the car business before this, two really great high reputation industries, and I always felt like it was working an uphill battle. And getting into real estate, it was very similar in that way that property managers, unfortunately, real estate agents, unfortunately, don't have the best reputation. And so, like you said, similarly but different. Obviously, being in sales, sometimes it's emotional and it's exciting and it's great, celebratory. But yeah, when people only talk to you when something's wrong, when they need their car fixed, when something's wrong at the house.
Yep. And being a property manager, you really have to be able to take your emotions out of things and just it's the business, you know. Because if people are paying their rent on time, nothing's going wrong with the house, everything's working great, the owners and I aren't talking hardly ever because we don't need to. They're getting their money, they know their house is taken care of. Same goes tenants, everything's going great, they're not reaching out to me just to chat, you know. But as soon as something goes wrong, it's my fault. I'm the one who needs to fix it right now.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to take a lot of anger directed towards you and be able to not internalize it and just deal with the situation that needs done.
Yeah. And that makes sense. So, I mean, clarify, I guess, for those who aren't sure if you are in sales or if you're in property management or vice versa, how exactly those differ when it comes to how you operate, who your responsibilities and duties are to, and just what that looks like on a day-to-day.
Yeah. So, well, in sales, obviously buyer's agent, seller's agent, you're going to be representing them to the best of their ability. And you're going to be dealing much more with, showing houses and putting in offers and that sort of thing. On our end, it is much more of a long-term working relationship because when an owner signs up for us to manage their house, there's some that it may be just for a year, but the bulk of people are 5-10 years. They're different reasons that they're have an investment property, whether it be accidental landlords that they didn't intend to be and something couldn't sell their house and they needed to be, or they're looking for cash flow, or they're looking for just building equity to be able to sell it later. So in my role, fiduciarily, I am responsible to the homeowner. So
I think that's what most people don't realize.
Yeah. They hired us. They're the ones who are paying us our commission. We're there to protect their investment and, look out for them the best that we can in terms of what maintenance costs are, what rent prices are going to be, turnovers, that sort of thing. But the other side to it is that, honestly, we're also there to protect tenants from bad landlords because there are lots of those.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily licensed because you don't have to be licensed to manage your own home.
Right.
And
we just heard a wonderful story about that, actually.
There's lots of people who do things very wrong. And so that's something that we're there to have that balance and make sure that you're getting what you pay for as a tenant, but also that it's, like I said, fiduciarily looking out for the owner's interest first.
Yeah. I appreciate that you said it that way because I think a lot of people, at least in the public perception, believe that property managers are the worst. They just hate everyone. They don't care. They just want their money. And then that landlords are the same thing. They're filthy rich. They don't care about you, just slumlord, whatever. Again, we were just talking about this with Daniel Muldoon, but everybody in property management sees it where it's almost always the unlicensed landlords. It's almost always the ones who do things off the books for one reason or another. And of course, there are some less than ethical property managers, but those are the ones that give the rest of us a bad reputation. And that's really unfortunate, both in sales, but particularly in property management.
It's also what leads to lots of legislative changes that, we can get into if you want to at some point, but definitely hinder some things and can end up hurting people even more in some instances. It's prime example here, the stereotype, I'm not going to get my security deposit back. They just want to keep that. I don't want to keep the security deposit. If I go into a house when someone moves out and everything's perfect and I'm able to return the whole deposit, that's amazing. That means I don't have to do any work. Like that means I can just get it right. Yeah. I would love to return full deposits every single time. But the stereotype is, well, they're just going to keep it, which is also negligent of there's legislation about how those have to be
Exactly.
handled.
Yeah, right.
And if you charge for things that you shouldn't, and you could go to court and have to pay them treble damages.
Mhm.
Right.
So
It's not worth it.
it's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype, yeah, we do have to fight against sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think being a part of public policy for me personally, and I know you're a part of that because you have to keep up with legislation, both for your sake. Like, for example, for me, I'm protecting myself, but also for our clients, because if they're not up to date on current legislation, requirements, restrictions, rules, then we're hurting them. And that's a big deal.
Well, and that's a big thing right now. The last few years, the Colorado legislature has been very harsh about property management laws.
Yeah, what you can and cannot do in your own house.
And for instance, this year they just passed this new warranty of habitability bill.
Yeah.
And if you're not informed on what's going on with that, you're going to slip through the cracks and could face huge fines, could end up with in lots of trouble because you didn't have someone out to fix the refrigerator within 24 hours.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that's in place because people who didn't know what they were doing were not doing it right, because we would have already had somebody out there that soon. You need to have a working refrigerator.
Exactly.
Right.
But
it's not like you don't want to.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. Now, there are owners who don't want to, but part of my job is saying, hey, you have to do this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely that balance of how can we make sure that both ends of this deal are going to be happy while working for one end of this deal.
Yeah. And that's one thing I actually just said. So I'm renting my place now in Denver. And one of the conversations I had is, look, I want to get my money. Obviously, I just want to get things taken care of. I don't even really want to know what's going on. Just handle it, take care of it for me. But at the end of the day, I do care about my tenant relation. Why? Because I care about getting the money and getting it on time, but also I care about my property, my place, how their experience in that is, because I don't want to be that guy that's looked at as, oh, just wants to get his money, doesn't really care about me. It's like, no, I understand what it's like being on the other side of those things and needing a place to stay and not really having a choice. So I care about the tenant relationship a lot, as I'm sure you do.
And I think that's definitely something that, you know, I've owned houses. I own my house now, but I've also rented more of my life than I've ever owned a house. And I had some very bad property management companies and very bad landlords and very good ones.
Yeah.
And, you know, ultimately you're not going to make everyone happy all the time. But yeah, we want to make sure that, you know, if we're going to justify this is what we're charging for rent, it has to be worth it to be paying that in rent as well.
Right. So I'm curious, if I recall, I met you at YPN, right?
Yeah. We
Okay.
definitely
I also met you at YPN.
Both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is, it's really cool being able to come back and like talk about that retrospectively. But what is your history, to take it back a little bit, with YPN? How did that start for you and getting involved? Because I know you got a license in 2017, started operating, and then what helped you turn that corner?
So when I got licensed, I was with a different company, not Dorman, and honestly, I didn't know anything about YPN. It was, one of those, my broker was someone who was, we're all together and you don't need to go to those things.
Gotcha.
And when I went to Dorman in August of 2018, Alex Yoder was very involved in YPN and everything. And it was more along the lines of, it wasn't a, hey, you should check this out. It was, we go to this. This is what we do. Yeah. The YPN meeting, we're all there. And so I went and checked it out. And from a property management standpoint, what's the best about it is, we thrive on referrals from sales agents who, whatever reason it is that someone's needing to rent. And so I've been able to make some good connections there and get referrals, but also we don't do any sales out of our office, even though we're licensed and could. We only do PM.
Okay.
So if I have an owner who's looking to sell, I know a bunch of agents that I could say, here's a good person to talk to. Here's this. And, knowing their personality, actually knowing people here, like, know this would be a good connection, and that sort of thing. And it's fun to be in the world of people who are doing similar things that we do and doing the housing market stuff. And
because they get what you're going through.
Yeah. Exactly. And just being informed and everything like that.
Yeah.
It's definitely, obviously it's not my best lead source or anything along those lines, but I think it's definitely worth the time that I'm there, and I've made some good connections and some good friends, and definitely big fan of YPN.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of funny. It's the exact opposite for my company now. So having a little bit of experience in property management in the beginning, just getting my feet wet in different aspects of real estate, I quickly realized that was not for me for all the reasons that you explained that you enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that was just so tough and feeling like, man, I have to please two parties now. It's not just my client. So yeah, that was super duper tough. So I really respect you and understand to a degree what that feels like. But yeah, with YPN, it's one of those things too, where I feel like property managers, yeah, sales agents have their preferred contractors, vendors and stuff, but you guys deal with them and you need them quickly and you need them to be consistent time and time again. So you're one of the people who I recommend most highly for vendors and contractors.
And that's for sure. Cause yeah, our company manages over 1,000 doors.
Jeez, wow.
So when we're dealing with vendors, it's not a plumber who's usually getting just a one-off job.
Yeah.
It's somebody who they're getting consistent work from us. So I know that they're going to give us good prices. They're going to do good work. Because if they're not, we're going to find someone else who does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. And I definitely love to recommend people like to my family as well. Like my sister-in-law is redoing her kitchen, and I've recommended her an electrician and a plumber and all these things that ended up costing them less than the people they were just randomly calling.
Yeah. And that's how it should be, in my opinion. Because like I people say this all the time, and I think people use it a little generously, but I treat my clients like my family in the way that if I would tell my family, my own mom, something about a real estate transaction, hey, look out for this, do this within my legal bounds, of course, why would I not tell that to my client? I owe them that fiduciary duty. I care about them just on a personal level. I think that's something we should be saying.
Well, and with that too, like if I'm recommending something to one of my homeowners, maybe because they're taking their property out of renting and they're going to be selling it or moving back, or they're getting it ready for being rented before we're managing it, I'd prefer they're going to use these people that I know are going to do good work.
Right.
And it's the same people that I'm going to use at my own home when I need things done.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
nice.
Yeah.
Do you think YPN has springboard? I guess we've been using that word a lot.
Boy, where have I
today
heard that before?
And months. Has it put you in a position to do anything else within the community or within like the property management or real estate world?
Well, so there's kind of two parts to that, because I'm involved in a lot of groups besides just YPN, and there are some that are very PM specific, NARPM, CPM, things along those lines that sales agents going to would be worthless to you.
Yay, more acronyms.
Yeah, exactly. But on YPN, there's certain times that I'm, if we're talking about sales contracts, I don't do sales. It's not relevant to me.
Yeah.
But having an appraiser in, that's really interesting to know their side of it, because that sales price is going to be reflective of how the rental market's going to price things.
Yeah.
But on top of that too, YPN opens the door to knowing about other avenues in PPAR.
Okay.
And so like community relations or policy, knowing about what's going on in those different
very
groups,
closely connected.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know anything other than, the PPAR email that comes out.
Okay.
If it wasn't that at that meeting, we're also saying what's going on in those things.
Okay, nice.
Yeah. And that's what I appreciate so much about it is just knowledge by diffusion, right? Being in such a large group of not only if you just segregated between sales agents and property managers, but within property managers, I'm sure hey, we stick to this area. Hey, we stick to this type, right? Within sales, there's luxury, there's investors, there's VA, like everybody kind of has their niche. And so being able to hear and to understand, that's not my bread and butter, but I see that may actually translate to me, or that may come down the pike to me and affect my clients. And that matters. So part of that too is I use this example a lot. I've already used it once today. But for example, when we had that meeting and we talked about insurance and homeowners, like specifically for wildfire, like if you have an owner that all of a sudden they get a non-renewal in the mail from their insurance company, that's a huge deal. Or now all of a sudden somebody who has is an investor with multiple properties and they get a non-renewal, well, guess what? Or the price just goes up too high. That is no longer feasible. That's a huge deal. That's something that you should know about, because guess what? While it did happen suddenly, it was not a surprise. We knew this was happening eventually.
that's something, a good example of that is, we manage townhomes, and
Mhm.
insurance on
Ooh,
townhomes is
yeah.
insane right now. And so then I have owners who, they're out of state. They
Yeah.
are an investor. They've never been here. They're like, this is
What is
ridiculous.
that?
My property that I have in Indiana isn't like this. And being able to kind of explain why their HOA fees are going up, and
Yeah.
that it's across the board. It's not just your house,
Exactly.
and that sort of thing. And putting out that fire, but then also through connections that I made actually at YPN, being able to recommend an insurance broker if they're looking for, I want to see about a new company for this, that I can say, well, here's the guy that I would talk to, and
Exactly.
see what he can do for you, because I don't know, I'm not an insurance agent, so
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. And I think, again, in real estate, we're the connectors of a lot of people. We're not supposed to
Mm.
be the experts in these things, but it's like, hey, I can connect you with somebody who is, or who does, or
Yep.
who knows. So something I'm really curious about, just because you might see more interesting things than I do. Just one quick one. What's the most interesting, or rather funny, story you have from property management?
I
Tenant,
also had
owner,
that question.
whatever. I'm just so
I will-
curious, because I know
well,
you guys see some stuff.
I'm going to give you two answers on this, because
Okay.
one is actually funny, and one was not funny until it was completely dealt with. But
Ooh, yeah.
so funny one is, I had a tenant who put in a work order because his screen had a hole in it, like the screen in his kitchen window, and he's like,
Okay.
I think a squirrel was chewing on it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and replace this screen. It's not something that happens often, but okay, we'll do that. Send someone
Yeah.
out, replace the screen.
Hmm.
A week later, he turns in the same work order. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Because that's not something that should just be happening.
That fool's
Right.
collecting screens.
Yeah. He ends up sending me a picture of a squirrel that's on the railing of his porch, just staring at the windows. Picture's still on the desktop of my computer right now.
That's
Just
so
looking
funny.
like I'm getting
No.
in there as soon as I can. And so we ended up having to send out a pest control company to try and do something to keep these squirrels from
Oh my gosh.
attacking this apartment window
That is
constantly.
so funny.
Because otherwise, we'd be replacing it once a
It's
week
just
for who knows how
staring.
Why
long.
though? Like, I've never seen that before.
Never
Right?
have either. It was a downtown property, so there must be some squirrels down here that are just
They're
used
drunk
to
off all
getting
the
feed all over. So that's pretty funny. But then I had a property that neighbor calls our office and tells us that he thinks there's some illegal activity going on at this house. And
Wait. Neighbor called about one of your properties that you managed?
yeah, the neighbor
Gotcha.
of the
Oh.
property,
Okay.
Okay.
that he thought they were doing like construction in the house.
Hmm.
And so I set up a property inspection, and I go over there. House has an unfinished basement, and I'm walking through the property with the guy. He's just acting like everything's normal. Then we start going down the basement, and he's like, "Oh, do we have to go down there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we definitely do."
Uh-oh.
He had completely remodeled this basement and made an industrial marijuana growing facility in it. Like, we're talking new air ducts, walls,
What?
the whole shebang.
You're like, dude, I respect you for this, but this can't happen.
This
Please stop
is
it.
not okay. And
Wow.
he then, I tell him, I'm like, you can't do this. And he's like, what? What do you mean?
I can't.
And then I'm like,
Oh no.
I'm gonna have to serve you a notice about this.
Oh my gosh.
Like this is not gonna be okay. Dude then offered me $5,000 to just turn around and ignore it, which I would have liked $5,000, but
You're like, to which I then accepted.
so the owner never found out about that. No. But no. So then it was a huge ordeal, and we had to serve notice and would have had to evict for it, but the guy left within the 10-day notice and pulled out as much of his stuff as he could so that he wouldn't be evicted.
Oh.
But then having to go through with construction companies and
Oh
stuff
my gosh.
because nothing was done right. It was done by
Oh,
him. And,
gotcha.
Nothing was done to code or anything
What
like
a
that.
crazy.
Okay.
But having to deal with an owner who's out of state, explaining all of this, dealing with this whole process, and then dealing with what we're charging the tenant for this when it comes to the security deposit. So at the time, not funny at all, and
Yeah,
not
no.
fun. But in hindsight, that was
That's
Oh, that's so
crazy.
wild.
I'll give you $5,000 if you just don't say anything. Like,
Seriously?
yeah.
What a
Oh,
crazy
man.
situation.
Yeah. Luckily, only time I've had that, just once. But
Wow.
Yeah.
How much did it end up costing to
Oh,
like,
it was
fix everything?
Like remediate?
it was several $1,000s. I can't remember the
Oh.
exact, but closer to 20 than 10.
Oh,
no.
Are you
no.
kidding
Just
me?
for that part. And,
Yeah. Because you
yeah.
have to demo and then
Do everything.
fix, I guess.
Yeah, and when luckily, like the owner was able to say, like some of the walls that were put up, he was like, "This isn't going to hurt anything in my basement. We can deal with this."
That's
But,
crazy.
Man.
but yeah, it was not a good time.
That
And
sucks.
and that's the part where, being a property manager, we get paid a percentage of rent. That's not going to change based on what
What you're
amount of
dealing
work
with.
I'm doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's, sometimes where, yeah, we're not having to do anything and we're getting that money each month. But there's other times where if you put in the hours that I put on that job, I probably wasn't
Oh,
making minimum wage on it. So
that's crazy.
that's the
It has
balance.
to balance
And,
out.
but every day's different. And one thing that
Different, but not good.
Different.
one thing that I heard a speaker talking one time about property management. It was at a property management conference, but he was asking, why do people hire a property manager? And people are given different answers, to lease their properties, to collect rent, to handle this. And he was like, no, you hire a property manager to solve problems, because all that other stuff really anybody can do. But what you're having is that when the time comes where something goes wrong,
Mm.
we're going to step in, we're going to know what to do, and we're going to get it taken care of.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yep, we're the problem solvers.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
That's so true, man. Because I think about what we do. I mean, even just in sales, right? On a day-to-day basis, it's not rocket science. In fact,
Yeah.
it's actually pretty simple, but it's so many moving pieces all at once, all the time.
Yep.
Right? Which is true for you too in a different way. And it's just like, none of this is particularly complex on its own, but it's so difficult and it
Mhm.
wears you
Oh, yeah.
down after a while.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
when we talk about the value of a realtor being a part of your association, having the knowledge that you do, because I know that there are property managers out there, licensed or unlicensed, that just don't put in the time and effort or care about their community or care about their clients like you and I do.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah. Well, for instance, I have an agent that I've gotten a few owner referrals from, but he tried to do it himself without the knowledge of what he was doing.
Like management?
Yeah.
Mm.
He had signed somebody up, leased out their apartment,
Ooh.
had a lease that he printed off online.
Ooh.
And
Oh,
3 days
gosh.
into the lease, his broker was like, no, you can't do
We're not
this.
doing
And
this.
he referred it to me. And I had to come in and clean up everything.
Yeah.
That lease that was printed online, half of it wasn't valid in our state. It
Are
had
you
things,
Oh my
about how they
gosh.
charge late fees that we can't do, and
Yeah.
all this other stuff.
And it changes so quickly.
Oh
Exactly.
yeah, it was a huge mess, and had it continued for that year, like
Oh,
it was a tenant
gosh.
we would have approved. Like it was a disaster.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
But we were able to take care of that owner and make it not the worst thing, like better than it would have been.
Better.
It was still a bad situation.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things, like, yeah, if you don't know what you're doing with it, it's real easy to mess up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And same goes on the sales side.
Sure.
There's a reason when I bought my house, I had a sales agent, because
Mhm.
I don't do that stuff on the day to day. And
Right.
yes, I
Exactly.
could have saved a few $1,000s by having my own contracts and just doing it, but I feel like I wouldn't have been able to negotiate the things that my agent was able to, and
Yeah.
get me the deal that I got on it if I
Yeah.
would have been doing it myself.
Yeah, and same thing on property management. Like, to vouch for you guys, people always think, oh, well, I could save a few hundred each month, or I could save this. Yeah, but what are they actually saving you over time, right? Because
Exactly.
when it comes to having the insider knowledge of, yes, negotiating, marketing, advertising your property, dealing with the tenant, but also just things like knowing the right contractors, knowing how
Yep.
to deal. And God forbid if you ever get into mediation or I almost said legislation, into litigation, man, how much money are they going to save you by having that information and knowledge?
Well, and that's
Exactly.
exactly, I've had to go to court before, or representing an owner, but like for a security deposit dispute.
Classic.
And I've had to do that 3 times, and each time it's completely upheld because we know what
You're doing.
What
we're
you're doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there's also been times with that where I've had owners who are like, you need to charge them for this, this, and this. And I'm like, we're absolutely not going to do that. Like that's
Right.
not justifiable. I won't risk my license for it. If you're going to demand that, then I'll turn this over to you and you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we're not going to. And typically that then makes them realize like, oh yeah, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a wild world. And
Yeah.
if you're not in it, it's going to be hard to just jump in and out.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I feel the same way. Like if you're, if I want to do sales, I'm not going to know what I'm doing. I should refer to an expert and vice versa.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think they should be combined. Like, I don't think one person should do sales and property management.
Yeah.
It would just be too much for that one person. There's too many moving pieces on both sides.
There are lots of people who do both and do fine with it. But even if you're always going to have one that's really your thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you'll see a lot of like property management where they also will sell the house for you afterwards.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to talk down on people who do that because some of them do know what they're doing,
Sure.
but they're not in that sales world every day.
Right.
And vice versa. If you're only in sales and you're, oh, I'm going to manage this one house because it's for my friend, you're not in that world every day. You're not.
Yeah. Are you really an expert at that point?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
competent is one thing, but are you really an expert? Because
Right.
in having these conversations at YPN, talking to people that are in their niches and have been there, even if it's a short amount of time, but like you said, when you're in something every day, you know it because you do it all the time.
Yep.
And so for me and my clients, like my value prop is that I am in my segment, I am in my market, and I do that every day. And I have a team that does this every day. So we have our systems and processes in place. And talking to property managers like yourself at YPN, I talk to you guys and I hear the difference massively even between you and another property manager who just manages a few doors, right?
Oh, yeah.
What is the difference? Oh, I had this one tenant this one time 3 years ago. It's like, that's a different time.
Long time.
And I'm not saying like that's bad information to go off of, but when the legislation's not even the same year after year, that's something we should know about.
Oh yeah. Things, I was talking about that warranty of habitability law, but even during COVID, the CARES Act restricted what you could do on evictions, but that also changed notice period. You have to, post notice for people not paying rent. Well, earlier this year, we found out, that was a surprise to everybody, that even though the CARES Act had ended, that part of it was still in effect. And so like if the owner has a loan on their house, basically anything that's government backed, they're still having to serve a 30-day notice. Whereas if the house is paid off or something like that, it's a 10-day notice. And if you don't know those things, you post a 10-day notice and it was supposed to be a 30, you've waited now all this time, it goes to court, they're going to immediately throw it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you just wasted all that time and money.
Yep.
And the owner's not going to be happy about that, obviously.
No, heck no.
Yep.
And I wouldn't, again, I always say too, professionally, if I wouldn't do it for myself, then I wouldn't do it for my client. So if I don't feel competent enough managing my own properties, I'm sure as heck not going to do it for somebody else.
Yeah, for sure.
There's no way.
That's, if somebody wanted me to be their sales agent, I would say, no, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, call them up.
Right.
But that's cool.
Man.
Huh. Anything else?
Not me.
Do you have any questions for us, Drew?
How do you guys deal with this world of sales?
We don't.
Honestly,
yeah.
The one thing I would say, just if I was able to talk to agents who do sales, is that when someone asks you, what would this place rent for? Don't tell them a number, because it is the bane of my existence when I get a referral and I'm telling them, oh yeah, the comps on this show.
So-and-so said.
Yeah, the comps on this show around 2,200. And they're like, yeah, well, sales agent said that I could get 32 on this. And I'm like,
you could in 20 years.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. It makes things a lot harder. It sets expectations weird. So,
it really does.
If you're in sales, find a PM that you can be friends with, because, you shoot me an email. I'm always happy to say, here's what comps are on something.
Yeah.
Or to answer any questions or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. You've been a great resource for me personally. it's been really cool to learn from you and hear from you through our YPN meetings and us talking. And I'm sure people would get a lot out of listening to that.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Like-
it's been
I
cool
agree.
to watch both of you come in as babies
Oh.
and
Young and
come into
wide-eyed.
the roles that you're in now. So it's
I
know. Definitely
Look
fun
at
to
us
see.
Look at us
now.
now. At
No.
the top of, just kidding.
It is really cool though, because I was saying earlier, it's interesting coming into these groups and you get into it for one reason or another.
Mm.
And my philosophy was always sit in, listen. I don't really have anything to bring to this, so I'm just taking it, right? I'm just absorbing, I'm just learning, I'm just listening, honestly. And now coming to the point where we're actually being able to turn around and give back, we're actually able to share, where we're actually not the lowest on the totem pole, if you will, that we actually have things to give to newer agents. And that's so cool to be able
Yeah.
to do.
Well, and that's something I have thought about, that year that I did sales, had I been involved here, just knowing that I wasn't alone, because
Yeah.
there were,
Mm.
there were people I worked with, there were other agents, but, I'm the one who's the new guy, doesn't, moved here from another state, don't have my,
That's
my
so
circle of
true.
influence or sphere
Yeah.
of influence. And, needed to know like, oh yeah, other people are also
Exist.
in this boat. Just for that alone, it would have been nice to be in that first year. Who knows how different my career would have been,
Yeah.
though I'm very happy with the way it shaped out.
Yeah.
In
It
this
worked
way.
out.
Right? It
Exactly.
worked out perfectly.
But no, it's a great group and everybody's very inviting, willing to network and chat and talk. And
Yeah.
it's great that it's like such a laid back environment to it too.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I
yeah.
appreciate, because it's like at the end of the day, we're doing business. We're here for a reason, but we also like to enjoy it. I like working with people that I like,
Yeah.
and I like referring my clients to people that I like.
Yep.
Right?
Mhm.
If at the end of the day I can't enjoy talking with the person that I'm working with, it's
Your
kind of
client's
frustrating.
not going to enjoy talking to the person.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yes,
either.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Plus, like going to things like the Halloween party and stuff
Yeah.
are fun.
It's
So-
fun.
Yeah, like, and we were saying this earlier too. Like this group, this community is one of the most engaged, involved communities that, again, we don't have. Fortunately, property managers, real estate agents don't have the best reputation. So seeing what people are actually like, seeing people that actually care about their clients, their work, their communities, is so refreshing.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
and realizing that most of the deals that are getting done aren't the people who I see on the park bench necessarily.
Exactly.
But, there's all these people involved in it.
Exactly.
It's very interesting, and yeah, it makes that huge group of realtors seem like more of a just
Community.
It's
small group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes the world feel a little smaller, which is nice. So this is a tough one, but I'm curious. So where do you see both yourself and us going forward in the future, I guess?
Well, as far as property management goes, honestly, I think this is a good time to be getting into it. If you're
Really?
not,
Mm.
just because with all those legislative changes, I can't fathom how anybody does this if they're not involved in it every day.
Yeah,
Mm.
I
There's just
agree.
no way you can keep up on it, and I think we're going to see more and more of people realizing that
Yep.
and saying, "I need to hire a property manager."
Mhm.
Okay.
And there's, I said we're a bigger company. We have over 1,000 doors. We're much more business systematic. We have to be that way. But there's people who are boutique agents who maybe they only manage 30 properties, but it's just them, so they're doing everything about it.
Mhm.
They're making a good living. They're happy with what they're doing, and there are owners who need someone like that who's going to
Mm.
hold their hand and call them on the cell phone every day and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's just lots of opportunity there, and then also just the market that we're in, because it is so transient with for military bases and people who live here but then may not want to leave but have to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mentioned accidental landlords earlier. We have a lot of those where it's somebody who they got PCS orders and it doesn't make sense to
Mm.
sell the house now. Never
Yeah.
planned to
Yeah.
be
Happens a lot.
a landlord, but it's just we're in a good market for rentals if you can deal with all the headaches.
That's a
of it.
big if.
Yeah.
That's a big if.
But as far as the sales side goes, it's going to be real interesting to see what happens with the NAR thing and buyers agents and everything along those lines. And I'm obviously not well versed enough of that to even speculate, because I've mostly said I don't care because I don't do that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see how that goes, and then just home values are so high here.
Yeah.
And, as interest rates keep changing, how's that going to affect the market more? It's definitely,
Ooh.
I say this a lot when I'm meeting with clients and we're, predicting how many days it's going to sit empty or what rental price. But I say a lot, if I had a crystal ball and knew the answers, I'd make a lot more money than I do now. But I don't. All I can do is guess.
Speculate.
And that's kind of how we all are
Yep.
in that, no amount of expertise that we have is going to make it so that we could say with a guarantee, this is exactly what's happening in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. But Colorado Springs just in general, though, is, there's a reason I wanted to move here. There's a reason lots of people want to move here.
Mhm.
There's a reason that people from my hometown come on vacation here. And I don't see anything changing about that.
Mhm.
But where's that balance where it's still affordable to live here?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's who knows.
Right.
Yeah. And even just
I don't-
contrasting that with Denver.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like I have people, well, most people actually, like maybe they'll manage properties in both areas, but it's usually one or the other. Why? Because they're
Mhm.
completely different markets.
Oh, yeah.
And like you were
Exactly.
saying with the military bases, with the schools versus Denver, it's like we see a lot of consistency here, not as high highs, but not nearly as low lows.
Yep.
Denver, it's like people want to be there because they want to be there. And if they don't want to be there, they're not there.
Mhm.
And so you see these high highs, right? These hot seasons and then low valleys.
And then that also does affect us because when you get priced out of Denver,
Where do they
are you
go?
going?
Exactly. It's all connected.
And that's, like we have, we manage properties all the way up to Monument. And lots of times if I'm renting a property in Monument, it's not for somebody who's going to be working down here. This is a lot cheaper than living in Denver. And I
Sure.
can, adds 30 minutes to my commute. So we
Yep.
can deal with that. And I think we are going to see a lot more of that along the Front Range, just as things continue to spread out.
Yep.
But also what's going to happen with water with, you can't necessarily.
Oh, did you need that?
But like if you're, we've already seen some building permits not being issued because they can't guarantee that water would be available for it. That's definitely going to affect us in the future on both ends, buying and selling and property management.
Yeah.
But again, it's if I had that crystal ball, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about. And I think it's crazy how similar, but how different our worlds are. I always say the beautiful thing about real estate is it's so multifaceted, but it is multifaceted. If you're on one side, you're on one side for the most part. And I don't ever want to like step on any toes and cross lines where I shouldn't. And so that's why I'm just so thankful to have you for stuff like that.
Well, I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing. And I'm,
Yeah, right.
I'm more than
Trust me, I
happy.
feel the same way.
I'm more than happy to get any referral that you want to send me. So
Cool.
Same. Yeah.
we'll be able to treat them well and honest.
Cool. Well, that's all I got for you.
All right.
Same. Thank
Final
you so
thoughts?
much. Yeah. Anything?
No, thanks for having me. I mentioned earlier that I was on the radio for years, so it was definitely different to be on this end of an interview than that end. I think it's the first time I've ever done that. So,
Well, nice. There
Yay.
we go.
yeah, so there
That's
we go.
so exciting.
But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
you're
This has
welcome.
been Altitude Agents. I'm Kyle Wong, your 2024 YPN Chair.
And I'm Kari Wright, your 2024 YPN Co-Chair.
And I'm Drew Bartlett with Dorman Real Estate, and I'm the guest.
Thank you guys so much for joining. And as a reminder, here at PPAR, our YPN meeting is the second Thursday of every month at 3 o'clock. We'd love to see you there. Thanks, guys.